Well, thank you for joining us for Feature Friday today. Today we're going to be discussing subdivisions and how to create those effectively in Giraffe. If we haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Holly Conrad Smith. I am your customer success guru at Giraffe. So one of the best parts of my job is that I get to teach all of you how to use the different features of the platform. As we go through the program today, please feel free to unmute and ask a question at any time. We keep the group intentionally small for these Feature Friday presentations so that everyone can feel comfortable asking a question. If you don't want to unmute, you can always use the meeting chat as well, and I will keep tabs on that. And also feel free to pull up your Giraffe window, maybe on your second screen, and maybe follow along a bit. Getting that muscle memory going is really good for learning a new feature. So with all of that housekeeping out of the way, I'm excited to dive right in. So shared on my screen right now is sort of the beginnings of a subdivision. When you're designing a residential subdivision especially, you'll often start by laying out kind of a road network and sort of figuring out the basic outline of where you would like to add your parcels. And now that I have this set up, I can start adding some parcels here. So the first thing I'm going to do is just draw a generic polygon. I can do that in Giraffe with the shortcut P. I just clicked P on my keyboard, and now I can just come in here and maybe fill this triangular section towards the top. That has created just this generic polygon. And what I need to do to start subdividing this area is open up the flow builder. So the flow builder in Giraffe is just a way that you can add some predetermined algorithms or design rules to shapes that you draw in Giraffe. Today, we are going to be focusing specifically on the subdivide to lots algorithm, but you can see here that there are a lot of other choices for you as well. But I am just going to click on subdivide to lots. And you'll see when I do that, immediately sort of a grid of parcels and then an outline of a suggested building envelope also appears. We're going to need to do some additional edits here to make it make some more sense for what we're trying to design. So let's dive into those subdivision settings. I am going to open up one of the output features from this algorithm and then just open these subdivide lots settings. And here you can see there are a lot of settings to this algorithm. And that's great. It means that you have a lot of control. But I also totally appreciate that it can be a little overwhelming the first time you open it up. So we're going to go step by step through what all of these buttons and inputs mean and do. And then you can feel really confident creating your own subdivisions in your projects. So the very first thing that we need to do is tell the algorithm whether you want to solve for a target frontage or a target area. So the frontage would be, of course, the length of the front of that parcel, whereas the area would be the area of the entire parcel. So it is important to remember here that we are solving for lots, not building size. So both the frontage and the area will be solving for the entire lot size, not the building size within that lot. So I can choose frontage or area, and my sort of target options will change based on what I've chosen. I'm going to leave it on frontage just for the example. Isaac is asking target area 6,000 square feet. Can we use that? Yes, we definitely can. So if you set your solve for target to area, and then you can put your target area in as 6,000 square feet. Now, you might be noticing if you drew a really large subdivision like I did, that it keeps snapping to a different amount. And that's because we also give you some control over the absolute minimum that the lot size can be. And that is because, of course, as the algorithm is solving, it's trying to optimally fill with as many parcels as possible within a tolerance of your target. So you might want to tell it, yeah, my target is 6,000 square feet, but I definitely don't want any lots that are smaller than 5,500, for instance. So if I just update these to be 5,500, and then I can put in my target as 6,000. And now you're starting to see these much smaller lots appear based on these target amounts. Additionally, with the target area, you can also set an absolute minimum frontage. So maybe, I don't want any lots to be smaller than an 80-foot frontage. And then I can get these really long, skinny lots on this particular layout, which isn't super nice. But, just having that as the example there. So maybe I want to up these to like 160 perhaps. And then you get some lots that are a little bit nicer based on just the shape that we're working with. So that is definitely something to watch out for. You have your target, which is your goal area, but you also want to make sure that you set up your minimums. So if you're having some trouble where you're trying to type in a target and it keeps snapping to something different, make sure that your minimums are set up to be less or equal to your target amount. You can also make your absolute minimum your target amount if you wish. So all of these options, the solve for target and all of your target numbers kind of all go together. If we pop back up here to the top, you also have an option to split on the spine or not. So you'll notice that this solve has split along the middle of this shape. If I untoggle split on spine, you'll end up with just horizontal division rather than also having a vertical division. So you can always choose whether you want, depending on the shape or the size of the parcel that you're dividing. Sometimes you want it to split down the middle and sometimes you don't. When you do split it down the middle, you also have the option of having it just automatically divide, which means it'll just go straight down the center, even. Or you can set up a manual spine. So when I toggle over to the manual spine, I now have the ability to change the shape of this spine to be whatever I want it to be. You can do crazy things. You can, maybe you have perhaps like a geological something that you need to go around, like there's really crazy grading, or you want it to follow along some existing road, something like that. You can adjust your spine to match. The other thing that's cool about your manual spine is it also allows you to set up end parcels. So far, all we've solved for is what we call in Giraffe the inner area targets. So we've got our inner area target. If I make my end area targets maybe larger, we're going to see the difference here. And then when I start pulling back my spine, I'm going to start getting some solves of parcels that are perpendicular to the rest of the parcels. And you have granular control over the size of those lots versus the size of the inner lots. So that's what that means. When you see that inner area target, it means everything in the middle. The end area target is when you have the manual spine turned on, the area of these outer lots. Just adjust those a little bit. So that is your spine and the inner and outer lots. So that has pretty much set up all of our standards for our parcels. We've got some nice 6,000 and 7,000 square foot parcels. We've set our minimum frontage. We have a fun spine shape going on. But now we want to adjust our buildings that are sitting on these parcels. So the next section down here is your building envelopes. And you can actually choose to not generate building envelopes at all. If you just want to subdivide two parcels and that is your end goal, like perhaps you are just subdividing a large piece of land and then, reselling each of those individual parcels, you can remove the building envelopes. But once you add the building envelopes back on, you have control over your setbacks here. So I can set maybe these setbacks to be a little bit more realistic for a single family style development. So maybe we'll have a 10-foot setback on the front. The rear setback might be quite large, and then our side setbacks might be about 15. And then you start to see these envelopes that are more like the shape that you would expect your single family buildings to be. You also have control with the corner frontage. I'll show you this when we do townhomes because it'll make more sense in that situation. And then the last thing down here is showing the overlay. So the overlay is really useful because it gives you the area of every lot and also the frontage of every lot. So you can use this for your reporting and just to QA, QC, make sure that everything you've designed meets your specifications. So that show overlay toggle is very useful. The next thing I want to do is actually turn these building envelope outlines into buildings. Right now, we've still just got a flat generic polygon. There's no usages applied to this yet. So when I click on this polygon, I can see that I've got two outputs here. I've got a site output and an envelope output. The first thing I might want to do is change that site output to my parcel usage. And then I can change the envelope output to maybe my single family usage. And now you can see once I've done that, of course, the Giraffe Urban tab is generating metrics for what you've designed. You're starting to get your FAR calculation. You've got your gross building area. We've got a output of how many parking spaces might be required for this. And we have a count of how many units we've generated. So it's just like anything else in Giraffe. If you were to manually draw this versus using the help of the algorithm, you're going to get those metrics coming out at the other side. One last thing I did want to show with this. So right now we are assuming didn't want to open that one. We are assuming that the front of these buildings is going along the outer edge, but I can flip that. Usually this works best if I am not splitting on the spine. So if I turn that off real quick, you'll see that, it's assuming the front is along this edge. If I want that to flip and be along the other edge, I can always toggle on the flip. And that works really well. Like say you have a subdivision that is long and skinny and it's solving so that one side is the front, but you want it to be the other side, you can always use that flip to control that. So let me go back in here and turn back on my spine. Skip that, get that back. So yes, now we have, this subdivision laid out. We've got all these buildings added. We're starting to get our metrics applied. And this is obviously representing, more of a single family detached kind of situation. My personal favorite use of the subdivision algorithm is to generate townhomes. I come from an urban area. I live in Philadelphia, and my whole background in architectural technology has been in documenting and designing attached housing and specifically townhomes, some multifamily, but mostly townhomes. So I'll show you how to do that as well here. Before I show you how to do it manually, I do want to point out that we have some pre-made subdivisions in our flow features in the drawing palette here at the bottom. So if I click on that and scroll to the bottom here, we've got a residential subdivision already designed. And then we also have two kinds of townhomes. We've got just your typical row style townhome with an alley down the middle. And we've also got some tuck under townhomes that include that garage. So if I start drawing this townhome subdivision, you will see this one generates kind of a long strip of townhomes. If I make it a more realistic size, we won't have ones that are so long. And there you go. This is made the same exact way that we did the larger homes with the subdivision tool. It's just different inputs for to generate the output of having townhomes. So let me show you how to do that. I am just going to draw a rectangle. I am going to, again, open up the flow builder and subdivide to lots. It's going to give me that same kind of starting output, but we can jump in here and edit it how we wish. And this time I'm going to solve for a target frontage because that is easier for me to calculate with my townhomes, because I know that they're going to be, maybe 20 to 25 feet wide. So I'm just going to put in my frontage here being 25. I can set my absolute minimums just like before. And then the key with townhomes is that your side setback is going to be 0 because they are all attached together. And then what you can see here is these end ones end up being cut kind of short because that setback goes all the way around by default, but you can turn off that corner frontage and make your townhomes extend to the end. And then that way all of your homes are the same size. So maybe my front setback is much smaller. I can leave my rear setback around 10. And then when I apply my townhome usage to these, we get our lovely bank of townhomes. Of course, residential is not the only type of subdivision that you might be working with. We also have pre-built a couple of options like your industrial subdivision, which is just basically giving you a bank of warehouses, very typical. And you would create that the exact same way that you would create the residential one. You're just going to use an industrial usage. But what gets really interesting with what gets really great with the subdivision algorithm is that you don't have to use it just straight out of the box. The Giraffe Flow Builder allows you to combine multiple algorithms together to get a really unique output. So let's see what we can do if we kind of hack the subdivision algorithm a bit to get some more interesting or useful outputs. So I'm going to pull up a couple of examples that I created before the presentation. Just let those load up. I might turn off my video because sometimes the bandwidth is an issue. There we go. So the first one I want to show you is I have combined the subdivision algorithm and the apartment algorithm to create a podium for this building that is partially amenity and partially parking. So if I open up the Flow Builder and see how all of this is put together, I of course start with my apartment algorithm, which is just applied to a line feature and then creates all of my units. But I also get this boundary output that allows me to create a podium that matches the boundary of that building. And then what I can do with that boundary output is use the subdivide lots algorithm on it, set an area for those different subdivided sections, and eventually get to an output where I have assigned, basically 2/3 of this as car park and 1/3 as amenity. And then what's nice about that is as I change the size and shape of this building, it automatically fills in with that mix of amenity and car park as needed. So rather than having to draw those shapes manually, individually underneath the apartment algorithm, you can just, edit that one single line over and over again and have those updates made as you go. Right next door to this, I have done a very complex subdivision using the subdivision algorithm twice in the same flow. So what I did first is just drew a large kind of rectangular area, and then subdivided that area into large parcels. So thinking about each of these parcels rather than being an individual home parcel as being like a little block or neighborhood within the larger subdivision. And then I used a few of our newer flow transforms to explode out those outlines and turn them into roads. So I don't have to draw those roads individually. I can just let the algorithm solve for those blocks. And then I also took the envelope output, and instead of directly applying a building usage to it, I further subdivided that that output. So I've subdivided the larger one into large parcels, and then I subdivided the smaller parcels into actual home parcels with their building envelopes on them. The other fun thing I did is I used the strip transform to pull out some of those larger parcels and define them as something different than homes. So I've got one that is a detention basin pond type area and another one that is like a park with trees. So all of this is just one shape. As I edit this shape, crazy things might happen, but too crazy. The things that I have assigned will continue to update. So this allows you to be very creative. You can set some initial design rules and then kind of fill in your area as needed with the shape that you've drawn. So it gives you a lot of flexibility that way to control for what your goals are, and then you can get creative with your shapes afterwards. So that's really fun. The last thing I want to show with this is, of course, all of these things are well and good for demonstration and presentation purposes and understanding the layout of your project. But if you can't count them and apply costs to them, it's really kind of useless. So I do want to show that in our analytics output here, we are able to count all of these dwellings and get some really important metrics here. So things like dwellings per acre, car parks per acre, residents per acre, all of these kind of density metrics that end up being really important when you're designing a subdivision and probably bringing additional density to the area. All of these things that are important to report on are really easy to build out in analytics. The purpose of this webinar isn't to train on analytics, but we do have other webinars on our YouTube channel that are deep dives into how to build out your own analytics calculations. So I definitely encourage you to check those out. But it's pretty simple, pulling in properties from your project, like the dwelling count, the dwelling size, and using those items to figure out the math of things like your dwellings per acre. So really cool stuff here. And all of it is just with this one single algorithm that on face value looks like it's just for creating, a typical residential subdivision, but you can use it and go really deep and build things like that more complex algorithm, or even subdivide areas just using it as a subdivision, as a tool to subdivide shapes rather than creating a, air quote subdivision. So with that, we are done with the presentation. So we learned all of the settings of the subdivision algorithm. We looked at a couple of examples, how to build out a single family subdivision and a townhome subdivision. We looked at some of the default flows that Giraffe provides in all of your templates. And then we looked at some hacks, some ways to really deep dive into that algorithm and combining it with other ones to make a really custom design rule output. And then lastly, we looked at how you can count all of that data in analytics to give yourself a report on that project's performance. I want to open it up for if anyone has any questions. If you have a question either about the subdivision tool or even just a general question about Giraffe, feel free to unmute and ask that at any time. So thanks, everyone.
Hi, Holly. How are you? It's Isaac over here.
Hi, Isaac.
Really quick question. First of all, thanks for the presentation. It was very clear, the steps of how you get all the different subdivisions, and basically what you presented today was excellent. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
My question right now is, does Giraffe currently support any kind of generative options where, like the way you have the roads and the subdivision, rather than having that as a manual process, is there any kind of generative option that's currently supported by Giraffe right now, or is that in the works?
There's not. There are major upgrades coming to generative design in Giraffe. But as of now, I am not actually sure that there's any plan to do like generative design optioneering as you're mentioning. And that is mostly because we find that the designers and real estate folks who use these programs are smarter than the computer.
Yeah.
So we like to give you the tools to build your own design rules, and then use them to create your outputs. That's not saying that there will never be a time that we would have generative optioneering in Giraffe. We just need to work on it to make sure that the computer is smart enough to give you something that's worthwhile. We don't want to give you, 15 different options and all of them suck. So
No, absolutely.
Yep.
But what
So that's
what
where
you
we
showed,
are.
great. But what you showed so far really helps in terms of, I mean, I've been in the architectural field for over 23 years, but even looking at just how you had the pond and you've got the park, you still do have to have, manual process, and it's a very iterative process to start off with. But if I had this as a parcel and I'm going to subdivide it, I would first of all have my numbers knowing what percentage of the acreage will not be utilized just based on, certain things, whether it's easements, whether it's natural factors of the soil, ponding, or whatever, and then
Yep.
come up with a unit count, ultimately, and then try and match that when I'm doing my layout or master planning. So, but what you showed so far in terms of maximizing the lots, which is why I asked, can you set a maximum of the lot saying 6,000 square feet? That would be like the target square footage in some counties.
Yep.
And the minimum might be like 5,500 in some counties as well. So being that the minimum is there, 6,000 might be a good target to sort of see how many lots you can squeeze in this area. And this is a nice shape to even
Exactly.
that exercise. So I appreciate you answering that question. So that was very clear to me after you presented it.
Yeah, definitely. And then, as the designer, you can see what like the absolute maximum fit might be. And then you're going to say, okay, let's make that prettier.
Right,
In
right.
your next iteration, you'll do some more detailed work on it.
That's where the yellow trace comes in.
Yep.
But thank you. That's all for me. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Awesome. It sounds like we are good to go here. So if you do think of a question, feel free to email me directly, holly@giraffe.build. Always happy to help. And we will see you all next time. We have Feature Friday, the first Friday of every month. So definitely watch your email for those signups. And if any of your colleagues want to watch back this recording later, we'll be posting it to our YouTube channel shortly. So yeah, thanks again, everyone. And I hope you all have a great weekend.